Rest now, let your breathing slow, and let the vast tapestry of the past open before you. Imagine a river older than empires, older than memory itself. The Nile, winding like a silver serpent through the heart of Egypt. By day, it is the giver of grain, the carrier of boats, the pulse of an entire people. But by dusk, when the horizon burns with fading gold, it becomes something more, a mirror of eternity. On its banks, reeds sway in the warm breeze, fishermen pull in their last nets, and the hum of the village quiets into evening song. Children chase one another in the dust, mothers call them inside, fires are lit, and the scent of lentils and bread drifts through the air. Beyond these simple rhythms, a palace rises, white stone glowing softly under the dying sun. Inside, lamps are being lit. Servants whisper. Courtiers gather in shadowed halls. And in the chambers of queens, a cry is heard, the cry of a newborn. It is the year 69 before the Common Era, though none living here could know how those numbers will be written centuries hence. They know only that a princess is born to the house of Ptolemy, the Macedonian Greeks who have ruled Egypt since the time of Alexander the Great. They name her Cleopatra. Few yet realize that this small child, wrapped in swaddling linen, will grow to become a name whispered through millennia. The world she is born into is both fragile and immense. Fragile, because her dynasty is crumbling from within, siblings plotting against siblings, alliances splintering, Rome watching hungrily from across the sea. Immense, because Egypt is still the jewel of the ancient world, its temples vast, its granaries rich, its gods eternal in stone. Into this contradiction, Cleopatra takes her first breath. In her earliest years, she would have walked the palace gardens, where papyrus pools reflected the stars, where exotic birds nested in fig trees, where Greek statues stood beside Egyptian obelisks. She would have seen both worlds, the rational marble of the Greeks, the mysterious hieroglyphs of the Egyptians, and understood, even as a child, that she belonged to both. Where her ancestors kept themselves apart, speaking only Greek, she would choose a different path. She would open her ears to the many tongues of her land. Egyptian farmers chanting hymns to Osiris. Jewish traders bargaining in Aramaic. Nubian soldiers singing as they sharpened spears. Syrian merchants carrying tales in half a dozen dialects. Cleopatra would listen, absorb, and one day, answer them all in their own voices. For now, though, she is a child. She watches candlelight flicker on painted walls, where stories of gods and pharaohs stretch back into myth. She hears philosophers speak of Plato and Homer in her father's court, and priests intone prayers older than pyramids. She learns to sit very still, to watch without being seen, to gather knowledge like a squirrel gathers nuts. Every word becomes a seed. Every silence, a lesson. But even childhood in this palace is shadowed. The Ptolemaic line is a nest of vipers, where sons and daughters are both heirs and rivals. Cleopatra learns early that affection is dangerous, that trust can be fatal. Brothers may one day become enemies. Sisters may plot in silence. Yet the girl does not falter. She learns to smile when others speak, to let her gaze linger, to seem innocent even as her mind sharpens. Outside, the Nile continues its eternal cycle, flooding, retreating, leaving behind black earth rich with promise. Farmers kneel in gratitude. Priests proclaim the favor of the gods. For them, Cleopatra is still only a name. Yet destiny already coils around her like the river's bend. She is not merely a princess. She is the heir to both the brilliance and the corruption of her house. And so, night deepens. Torches flicker on stone walls. The cries of the newborn fade to sleep. In the heavens, the constellations shine, the same constellations that watched over Ramses and Akhenaten, over centuries of kings and queens. Now they watch over her. The stars do not know her name, but they will. The world does not yet tremble at her beauty, her wit, her power. But it will. Cleopatra begins as all stories begin, not in glory, but in quiet. A cradle by a window. A mother's tired hands. A nurse humming a lullaby. And the river outside, whispering its endless song. Rest here, on the edge of her beginning. Breathe with the Nile. Hear the silence before the storm. For soon, this girl will rise to walk among gods and emperors. Soon, she will weave her destiny from language and spectacle. But for now, she is only a child of the Nile, drifting on the currents of fate. Now, let us move deeper into the palace halls. The child Cleopatra has grown, her steps lighter, her gaze sharper. She is no longer the infant rocked to sleep by lullabies, but a girl walking among scrolls and shadows. The world of her childhood is widening. The Nile still flows beyond the palace walls, but within these walls, another river moves, a river of knowledge. And she will drink deeply from it. Imagine the Library of Alexandria, not merely a building, but a vision of infinity. Vast halls, scented with papyrus and ink, scrolls stacked in chambers where the air itself seems heavy with memory. Though Cleopatra herself may not walk freely through all of its treasures, the library's spirit spills into her education. She is surrounded by tutors, philosophers from Greece, mathematicians from Alexandria, priests from Thebes, healers versed in herbs, astronomers who map the stars. Each carries a fragment of wisdom, and each places it in her open hands. Other rulers before her learned just enough to appear wise, just enough to command respect. But Cleopatra is different. She is hungry. She does not memorize simply to recite, she learns to understand. Languages, first. Greek, the tongue of her house, flows easily for her. Egyptian, the tongue of her people, she takes as her own, though her ancestors scorned it. She learns Aramaic, to speak with traders from the East. Hebrew, to converse with Jewish scholars who visit court. Median and Parthian, for the envoys from Persia. Later, even Latin, the voice of Rome. 9 tongues and more whispered. Each mastered not to boast, but to bridge. For language is more than sound. It is a key, a doorway into the heart of another. With words, she can calm anger. With words, she can spark desire. With words, she can bend an enemy into an ally. Cleopatra begins to see what few ever see, that armies may conquer lands, but language conquers souls. Her education does not end with language. Tutors press her into the mysteries of geometry, into the balance of numbers, into the patterns of the heavens. She learns medicine, not only the healing arts of herbs and oils, but the darker side, the testing of poisons, the knowledge of death as well as life. Some whisper that she keeps jars of venom, that she watches how creatures writhe and still under their sting. It is cruel perhaps, but it is also wisdom. A queen must understand both the balm and the blade. And still, she studies philosophy. The Greeks speak of reason, of logic, of the nature of justice. The Egyptians speak of Ma'at, the balance, the truth that underpins all. Cleopatra listens to both, weaving them together like threads in a single cloth. She understands that life is not only war and politics, but image, ritual, belief. To rule Egypt is to stand between worlds, between Nile and desert, between gods and men, between life and eternity. Her father's court, meanwhile, is a theater of tension. Cleopatra watches as envoys from Rome arrive, proud, calculating, their voices low but sharp. She watches as her siblings cast sidelong glances, their ambitions cloaked in politeness. She watches as priests argue with philosophers, as soldiers debate with scribes. And she listens. Always listening. Each word is another brick in the foundation of her power. As she grows, so does her presence. The girl becomes a young woman, her eyes bright, her voice deliberate, her bearing regal even before she wears a crown. Already, whispers move through the palace. This daughter is different. This one will not fade into silence. And in the evenings, when the palace is quiet, perhaps she walks alone to the balcony that overlooks the Nile. The air is cool, perfumed with jasmine. The river glimmers beneath the moon. She breathes it in and she understands, language, like the river, is life itself. Flowing, endless, able to carve valleys and move stone. She knows that one day she will need more than beauty, more than armies, more than gold. She will need words that pierce the heart like arrows, words that soothe like water, words that carry the weight of gods. And so, she prepares. Patient, quiet, certain. Cleopatra, daughter of Egypt, is no longer merely a child of destiny. She is shaping destiny with every lesson, with every word learned, with every silence mastered. And though the world still slumbers, though Rome still dreams of conquest, though her siblings still believe themselves her equals, already, in the silence of study, she has begun to win. Let us linger, now, in the growing presence of Cleopatra. She has mastered words, mastered silence, but she knows that language is not only sound. Power is not only spoken. Power is seen. It is breathed. It is staged. And so, she learns the art of image. From her earliest years, the palace has been a stage. Marble halls echo with footsteps, torchlight dances on painted walls, musicians pluck at strings to soften the mood of foreign ambassadors. Cleopatra watches closely. She sees how a robe's color shifts the mood of a chamber, how a single pause before entering can make men hold their breath, how scent lingers long after words are forgotten. She begins to practice. Perfume, first. Egypt has always been the land of fragrance, of lotus and myrrh, of frankincense burned in temples, of unguent stored in alabaster jars. Cleopatra learns their secrets. She blends oils not only for pleasure, but for presence. To enter a room with the subtle breath of lotus is to be remembered, to be associated with bloom, with freshness, with renewal. To arrive wrapped in the smoke of incense is to carry the temple into the court. She becomes a living symbol, as if the gods themselves walk beside her. Where others see mere fabric, she sees language. Silk, linen, gold thread, jewels pressed against her brow. Each piece is chosen not to adorn, but to declare. Sometimes she is Greek, robed in the flowing garments of her father's people. Sometimes she is Egyptian, painted with kohl, crowned with the vulture headdress of Isis. Sometimes she is both, merging worlds. Always deliberate, always aware that eyes are upon her. And then, entrances. She begins to study movement, the slow turning of the head, the measured pace of footsteps, the silence before a smile. She knows that to appear suddenly is to shock, to linger unseen before emerging is to seduce the attention of all. Later, legends will say she once wrapped herself in a carpet to be carried secretly into the presence of Caesar, a performance both daring and unforgettable. But even before that, in her youth, she practices the art of arrival. For a queen does not merely walk into a room. She descends as if from myth. Her tutors may teach philosophy and numbers, but Cleopatra teaches herself theater. Not the stage of actors, but the stage of life. She listens to poets reciting in the court and understands. Image is poetry given flesh. To rule, she must become a poem, recited in whispers, remembered in silence, painted in memory. And so she builds herself, day by day, not only as a woman, but as an icon. Beauty, yes, but more than beauty. Presence. To some, she is a goddess clothed in human form. To others, she is a dangerous enigma, a shadow in silk. To all, she is unforgettable. When she appears before priests, she lets them see Isis reborn. When she speaks to philosophers, she wears the calm dignity of Athena. When she walks among her people, she carries the earthiness of Hathor, the mother of all. Each mask is chosen, yet behind them, the mind of Cleopatra never sleeps. She knows that this theater is not falsehood. It is truth revealed in ritual. For a ruler is not merely flesh and blood. A ruler is symbol. And so, whispers begin to spread. Not only of her beauty, but of her presence. Not only of her voice, but of her silence. Men speak of the way her eyes linger, as if reading a secret hidden inside them. Women note the way she commands without raising her hand. Priests nod in approval, believing the gods smile upon her. Yet, beneath this theater, there is calculation. Cleopatra knows the danger of being underestimated, the danger of being dismissed as mere ornament. She will never allow it. She will take every weapon, perfume, jewels, music, light, and forge them into a sword sharper than steel. And so the theater begins. Egypt is her stage. The Nile is her backdrop. And she, Cleopatra, the daughter of Ptolemy, begins to play the role she was born to embody, not only a queen, but a legend. Let the night deepen, and let us walk again through the echoing halls of Alexandria. Cleopatra is older now, no longer the child peering curiously from behind her tutors, no longer the girl weaving silence into wisdom. She is a young woman, poised on the edge of destiny. Her voice carries weight, her gaze unsettles those who meet it. And yet, already, shadows stretch across the palace walls. Shadows cast not by her siblings, not by her priests, but by a power rising far beyond Egypt's borders. Rome, the restless republic, whose legions march with iron sandals across continents. Rome, whose senators debate in marble halls, even as their armies conquer distant kings. Rome, whose merchants sail eastward, whose generals hunger for glory, whose eyes fall now upon the granaries of the Nile. To Rome, Egypt is no longer a faraway jewel, but a prize within reach. And to Egypt, Rome is no longer merely a rumor, but a presence, loud, insistent, and dangerous. Cleopatra sees it first in the foreign envoys. They arrive in Alexandria draped in togas, their voices sharp with Latin. They stride through the palace with a confidence born not of courtesy, but of conquest. Where Egyptian nobles bow, they nod. Where Greek scholars argue philosophy, they speak of legions and tribute. Their words are polite, but their eyes measure every hall, every guard, every weakness. Her father, Ptolemy XII, is uneasy. He bends before Rome, paying tribute, begging for recognition. Cleopatra watches him bow too deeply, speak too softly. She sees the tremor in his hands, the fear in his voice. And in that fear she learns a new lesson, that a king who kneels too easily becomes no king at all. Rome smells weakness. Rome devours weakness. And so, the young Cleopatra begins to study Rome. Not only their language, which she learns with diligence, but their manner, their pride, their hunger. She listens to tales of Roman generals, of Pompey, the seasoned statesman, of Julius Caesar, cunning and ambitious, of senators whose intrigues are as sharp as any dagger. She listens and she imagines. She imagines standing before them, not as a supplicant, but as an equal. She imagines matching their wit, turning their arrogance against them, bending their hunger to her own designs. But for now, she is still a princess, her crown yet unclaimed. Her brothers circle like hawks, each trained by courtiers who whisper promises of kingship. Her sisters sharpen their own ambitions, their laughter hiding daggers. Cleopatra smiles among them, but inside she is steel. She knows that family is as dangerous as any foreign power. Egypt itself is a battlefield long before the legions arrive. And outside, Rome's shadow lengthens. Egyptian farmers hear of Roman ships at sea, Roman soldiers camped in Cyprus, Roman envoys counting the wealth of Alexandria. Merchants whisper of new taxes, of tributes owed to Rome. Priests murmur that the gods frown upon this intrusion. Yet Cleopatra does not fear. She studies. She prepares. She watches the shadow grow, and within that shadow, she begins to shape her own light. For Cleopatra understands something her father does not. Rome cannot be met with fear. Rome must be met with theater, with language, with cunning. Rome must be seduced, outwitted, ensnared. Not with armies. Egypt cannot match their legions, but with mind and image, with a queen who knows when to bend and when to strike. And so, as the sun sets behind Alexandria's lighthouse, its great flame lighting the sea for sailors, Cleopatra stands at her balcony. She watches the horizon where Roman ships sail. She feels the breeze heavy with salt and smoke. And she whispers to herself words no one else can hear, "I will not bow. I will rule." The first shadows of Rome fall upon Egypt. But Cleopatra is already planning, already rehearsing, already weaving the net in which Rome itself will one day be caught. The stage grows wider now, no longer only the Nile, no longer only the palace. It stretches across the sea, into the very heart of empire. And in that vast theater, a young queen sharpens her art. She will need every word, every silence, every glance. For the greatest struggle of her life has begun, not with swords, but with shadows. The palace of Alexandria was more than walls of marble and pillars of gilded stone. It was a living labyrinth of sound, scent, and ceremony. A city within a city, where the echoes of footsteps in colonnades mingled with the salt wind off the sea, where the lamps of scholars in the great library burned like constellations brought down to earth, and where children of royal blood played beneath the gaze of gods carved in granite. It was here, in this house of shifting power, that Cleopatra, small, bright-eyed, and watchful, first learned what it meant to be born into the coils of dynasty. She was not the first daughter of her father, nor the last branch upon the Ptolemaic tree. Brothers, sisters, cousins, all bound by rivalry, all sharpened by suspicion. For the bloodline of the pharaoh was as much a battlefield as the deserts beyond the Nile. Yet the child Cleopatra, her hair perfumed with lotus, her ears catching whispers in Egyptian, Greek, and the soft syllables of Hebrew merchants passing through the markets, grew in a cradle not only of privilege, but of peril. From her earliest days she understood, to survive in such a house was not to be loud, nor to shine too quickly, but to listen, to watch, to hold within herself the patience of the river that carried silt down from Ethiopia, slow, silent, unstoppable. Her tutors came in procession, a philosopher with scrolls from Athens, an Egyptian priest who spoke of Isis and the secrets of the temple, a Nubian dancer who taught her rhythm with clapping hands and swaying hips, a linguist who set before her the mysteries of tongues spoken on the fringes of the known world. And the child absorbed them all. Words clung to her like bees to honey, meanings unfolded in her mind as if she had always known them, as if some ancient goddess whispered translations in her ear. At night, in the hush of her chambers, when the noise of the palace had softened into the murmur of the harbor winds, she would whisper prayers not only to Isis, her ancestral goddess, but also to Athena, to Artemis, to the strange gods of faraway places whose names she gleaned from wandering scholars. For Cleopatra was not bound to a single shrine. She was a child already weaving together the scattered threads of worlds, already learning that power belonged not only to those who ruled armies, but to those who could speak across borders, across tongues, across dreams. Her siblings quarreled, her father traveled, and in the cracks of neglect she grew, sharpening herself like a blade kept hidden, biding her moment. To others she was simply another daughter of the house of Ptolemy, but within her small frame, beneath her careful smile, burned a will as deep as the granite quarries of Aswan, as fierce as the lion goddess Sekhmet waiting for war. And though no one yet spoke her name in the markets of Rome, though no coin yet bore her profile, though no chronicler yet traced her deeds on papyrus, already, in the silence of her youth, she was preparing to step into history. Already, unseen, unheralded, the girl who would one day be queen was teaching herself how to bend empires with nothing more than the breath of her voice and the weight of her gaze. And so, in the soft half-light of Alexandria's dawn, we drift again into the chamber of words, a place where voices become weapons sharper than any bronze blade, and where silence itself can wound deeper than the thrust of a spear. Cleopatra, seated on cushions embroidered with lotus and papyrus, is not merely a woman rehearsing speech, she is a sovereign rehearsing dominion. Before her stand her scribes, her tutors, her secretaries of state, men whose lives have been bent into ink and parchment, whose every line written may decide the fate of armies, whose every phrase translated may sway the loyalty of cities. For Cleopatra has taken into her keeping the treasure of tongues, not only the Greek of her Macedonian ancestors, not only the Latin of Rome which presses now like a wave upon Egypt's shore, but also the Aramaic of merchants, the Hebrew of prophets, the Egyptian of temple priests, the language of her own soil, whispered by farmers in the fields and carved into the tombs of kings. Few rulers before her had descended so low or risen so high, to speak with both peasant and senator, to speak with both goddess and soldier. Her mouth is an empire's mirror. When she speaks Greek, she wears the diadem of Hellenistic grace. When she speaks Egyptian, she is Isis reborn. When she leans into Latin, she is the consort of Caesars, the whisper that curls into Rome's marble halls. And here, in this room perfumed with cinnamon and frankincense, she shapes phrases as if weaving silk on a loom. Every cadence is tested, every pause measured, every glance rehearsed until it strikes with the subtlety of moonlight on the Nile. For Cleopatra knows, the ear is the true battlefield of empire. Armies march only after hearts have been bent, and hearts bend only after words have entered like arrows tipped in honey. She learns how to speak not to one, but to many at once. To the Roman general who thinks in conquest, to the priest who dreams in symbols, to the trader whose gods are profit and loss. She discovers that language is not merely a tool of communication. It is the very fabric of perception. To call herself Pharaoh in Egyptian tongue makes her eternal. To call herself Basilissa in Greek makes her cultured. To call herself Regina in Latin makes her partner to Rome's destiny. Thus she becomes more than a queen. She becomes a prism, a shifting reflection, a woman who can never be contained by a single name. And the walls of the chamber, lined with scrolls from the library that still breathes behind marble columns, seem to echo her practice, as though the ghosts of Herodotus, of Homer, of Plato lean close to listen. She is student, but she is also already the equal of any philosopher. Her words are her armies, her voice her fleet, her breath the very tide upon which kingdoms rise or sink. In this moment, in this long rehearsal that stretches into years, she sharpens her gift until the world itself bends toward her syllables. And we, listening across centuries, can almost hear her. A murmur like the Nile at night, a rhythm that promises dominion, a whisper that will one day enthrall emperors. Cleopatra, the queen whose tongue was sharper than a phalanx of spears, whose voice was the empire's mirror, whose language was destiny itself. The scene opens not with the marble grandeur of palaces, nor with the quiet hush of libraries, but with the pulse of the city's heart, the market of Alexandria. The morning haze lifts slowly, revealing stalls spilling with color, sound, and scent, a cacophony that is somehow ordered by the rhythm of human exchange. Here, the pulse of Egypt beats strongest. For it is in the market, not the throne room, where the whispers of empire gather, where the hunger of the people meets the wealth of the land, and where Cleopatra herself, unseen yet ever present, is both judged and remembered. Spices fill the air, sharp with cinnamon from Arabia, rich with the musk of myrrh from distant Nubia, and tinged with the salt of the sea. Fishmongers shout, their voices carrying above the crowd, as baskets of glistening catch are hauled from the harbor at dawn. Cloth sellers unroll bolts of shimmering fabric from Syria, red and purple threads woven like captured fire. Traders from India display ivory bangles and pearls like drops of frozen moonlight, while farmers from the Nile Delta arrive with figs, barley, and honey in clay jars sealed with straw. The people press close, bartering, arguing, laughing, cursing. The marketplace is a tide, swelling and retreating, alive with a language of hands, of voices, of eyes. It is a place where wealth and poverty brush shoulders, where a beggar might tug the cloak of a Roman merchant, where a soldier of the queen might stand guard beside a barefoot child. Yet beneath this din, beneath the clatter of amphorae and the neighing of horses, there is something else, a hum of expectation, a murmur of unease. For Egypt, though rich in grain, gold, and gods, is not free from shadow. Rome looms large, its hunger for land insatiable, its generals watching Egypt's shores with eyes as sharp as hawks. And the people know this. They feel it in the price of bread, in the rumors carried by sailors, in the way foreign coins mix more and more into their hands. Cleopatra, though queen, is not absent from this place. Her image gazes down from coins exchanged in the stalls, her profile carved with deliberate strength, a nose proud, her features sharp, a face meant to command, not to please. Her name is spoken by vendors who claim their figs are fit for her table, by mothers who warn their children to grow wise and cunning as the queen. She walks here rarely in body, for the press of the market is dangerous, but she is everywhere in spirit. For she knows that power is not only measured in the throne room but in the stomachs of the people, in the fullness or emptiness of their bowls. And so, as the sun climbs higher, as dust rises and settles upon the shoulders of traders, as coins pass hand to hand, the queen's unseen presence lingers like a shadow across the square. Every loaf of bread carries her weight, every jar of oil reflects her reign, every grain of barley remembers the Nile's gift, and the Nile, always, is hers. The market is no mere chaos of trade. It is a mirror of the world itself, where east meets west, where old gods share space with new, where rumor becomes prophecy. And in this shifting, restless space, Cleopatra reigns unseen, her power flowing not only from crown and temple but from the very hunger and heartbeat of her people. Her rule is carried in the laughter of children clutching honey cakes, in the worry of old men counting copper coins, in the eyes of merchants who weigh both goods and futures. In the market of Alexandria, her kingdom breathes, her image burns, and her legacy gathers its strength. And now, we step softly into another chamber of Cleopatra's Alexandria, not of marble alone, not of politics, not of temples with their incense and columns, but of laughter, masks, and drama. For the queen's city was not only a treasury of grain and ships, not only a fortress of armies and cunning treaties, it was also a stage, alive with voices, gestures, and the dreams of ordinary men and women caught in the webs of story. The theater of Alexandria rose with tiers of stone, semicircles carved to embrace the human voice, each step polished by the sandals of thousands who had come before. In its heart, under the sky that curved like a painted dome, actors lifted their masks of tragedy and comedy, and through their mouths, through their movements, the myths of Greece and the stories of Egypt were spoken anew. Dionysus still reigned here, god of wine and ecstasy, of song and sudden madness, and yet beside him walked Isis, eternal mother, eternal mourner, who carried in her hymns the ancient cadence of the Nile. Cleopatra knew the theater well. She did not always sit in the royal box, for sometimes she disguised herself among the crowd, cloaked, her hair hidden, to feel the pulse of her people. She heard their sighs, their laughter, the way they wept for Oedipus, or gasped at the cleverness of Odysseus, or chuckled at the foolishness of men undone by their own pride. She listened, and in their voices she found a mirror of her kingdom. For a queen, too, was an actress, moving across the grandest stage of all, her role one of infinite masks. In the theater's shadows, philosophers argued over the purpose of drama. Was it to purge the soul, to cleanse through pity and fear, or was it to distract, to soften, to amuse? The queen cared little for the quarreling, for she knew something deeper, that the theater trained her people to live with symbols, to accept masks, to understand that life itself was both tragedy and comedy, inseparable, insewn. When the actors spoke of kings betrayed, of queens abandoned, of lovers meeting beneath the moon only to be torn apart by fate, all eyes flicked toward her, Cleopatra, radiant upon her seat. For even then, her life had already become a performance greater than the plays themselves. She was the daughter of Ptolemy, who had survived treachery and exile, who held the throne not by chance but by wit and spectacle, and the people knew it. So she let the theater breathe into her rule. She took its lessons. She learned how to pause, how to let silence itself speak louder than 1,000 words, how to weave costume, gesture, and glance into weapons sharper than steel. She knew when to laugh, when to weep, when to allow herself to be seen, and when to hide in shadow. And yet, beyond politics, beyond strategy, she also loved the theater for its gift of humanity. Here, slaves and merchants, scholars and soldiers, noblemen and children sat shoulder to shoulder, swept together by story. The theater reminded her that a kingdom was not merely grain, taxes, and soldiers, but beating hearts longing to see themselves reflected upon the stage of eternity. As torches flared against the dusk, and the voices of chorus and flute drifted into the Alexandrian night, Cleopatra sat and let the rhythm of the play enter her blood. She was queen, yes, but also woman, also child of myth, also a fleeting shadow upon the great stage of time. And in that knowledge, she understood that even her reign, splendid, contested, remembered forever, was but another act in a drama that stretched beyond marble, beyond Nile, beyond crown. For all of life, she saw, was theater, and she, Cleopatra, was both its actress and its audience, both the mask and the face beneath, both the queen upon the throne and the woman lost in the crowd's laughter. Now, let us move gently into the corridors of power, where words become instruments sharper than swords, and where Cleopatra begins to learn the subtle art that will define her reign, diplomacy. The city of Alexandria is alive, not only with the sound of merchants and markets, not only with the laughter of children and the rustle of scholars' robes, but with the quiet, constant hum of politics. Envoys arrive from distant lands, their ships glinting in the Mediterranean sun, carrying letters sealed with wax, with images of emperors and kings, with promises, threats, and the delicate weight of expectation. Cleopatra, still young, sits within her father's palace, her eyes like twin lighthouses scanning each new arrival. She listens, not with impatience, but with the still, cold focus of a mind learning the patterns of power. For every word spoken carries intention, every gesture is measured, every silence calculated. The people outside may see only laughter, only ceremony. But within these halls, alliances are born and tested, loyalties weighed, futures quietly written in invisible ink upon the air. And Cleopatra, daughter of Ptolemy, heir to centuries of rule, begins to understand what her predecessors never fully grasped. Diplomacy is not merely negotiation. It is performance. A queen must appear strong yet gentle, aware yet amused, desirable yet untouchable. Every meeting is a stage, every audience a theater in which she is both actor and playwright. Here she first meets the Roman envoys, men whose presence is both intoxicating and threatening, who carry with them the shadow of a republic that stretches across continents, whose legions whisper of conquest even before their boots strike the sand. Some speak quickly, with gestures meant to charm or to intimidate. Others measure her gaze, testing the steel behind her eyes. And Cleopatra, though still learning, still observing, meets each glance, each word, not with fear, but with calculation. She understands instinctively that Rome is not merely an army. It is a mind, a network of ambitions and desires, a tide that can drown or lift kingdoms. Yet she is not simply cautious. Already, she experiments with strategy, subtle and deliberate. She smiles at the right moment, leans forward when advantage is needed, pauses as if the universe itself awaits her next word. She discovers that power is most potent when it is offered lightly, like perfume drifting from an unseen vessel, not grabbed, not forced, but noticed, remembered, and longed for. And in these early encounters, the young queen begins to see the dance of diplomacy, that strength may be hidden beneath silk and coal, that treaties are often won before they are written, that the alignment of tongue and gesture can sway the heart more surely than armies can sway the earth. She watches Rome, and she measures Egypt against it, counting both advantage and vulnerability, understanding that her destiny will require not only courage, not only cunning, but a mastery of the invisible currents that flow beneath all power. And so she trains herself, day by day, hour by hour, in the art of subtlety, in the theater of the mind. A raised eyebrow, a carefully placed word, a thoughtful silence, these are her weapons. And already, even in youth, Cleopatra is beginning to forge the persona that history will never forget. A queen who is as shrewd as she is beautiful, as cunning as she is revered, as fearless in counsel as she is commanding in presence. In the quiet that follows each meeting, when the corridors empty and only the distant hum of the Nile reaches her chambers, she contemplates the delicate balance she must maintain. For diplomacy is a game of shadows, and the queen who missteps is quickly swallowed by them. Yet Cleopatra does not fear the shadows. She steps into them, learns their rhythm, and bends them to her will. She is no longer merely a princess. She is a queen in preparation, a sovereign shaping the world even before the throne is hers, a mind sharpening itself on the edge of history. And now, let us drift toward the widening tide of destiny, where the Nile meets the currents of empire, and where Cleopatra's life, like the river itself, bends toward power and peril. The news arrives first as whispers carried by traders and scribes. Julius Caesar, triumphant in Gaul, victor over legions, master of strategy, now turns his gaze eastward, toward Egypt, toward Alexandria, toward a land of grain and gold, of temples and scholars, of the queen who has already begun to command hearts without yet holding the crown. Cleopatra listens to these reports with measured calm. Others panic, her father fears invasion, her brothers plot succession, but she sees a different path. Rome is vast, yes, but it is not infallible. Rome responds to cleverness, to audacity, to spectacle. And Cleopatra has mastered both. She knows, even now, that her future will not be seized by armies alone, but by artful display, by wit, by presence, and by the subtle conquest of perception. The palace trembles with tension. Caesar's emissaries arrive, their robes stiff, their expressions unreadable. The halls smell of incense and anticipation. The torches flicker as though they themselves hold their breath. Every eye is upon Cleopatra, though she is still veiled. Her figure hidden beneath silks, her hair bound with delicate chains of gold. For she has not yet revealed herself fully. She will not be anyone's pawn. And she will not enter history unnoticed. And then, the moment comes. Cleopatra is smuggled into the royal presence not through the front gates, not with guards or heralds, but rolled within a carpet, carried silently past corridors and courtyards. It is a spectacle of daring, of audacity, and above all, of theater. When Caesar unrolls the tapestry, there she is, poised, composed, unafraid, her eyes meeting his with a directness that startles, her presence both challenge and invitation. The two regard each other, not as conqueror and subject, not as foreign general and young queen, but as minds sizing one another, as two currents meeting in the vast river of empire. Cleopatra speaks, first in Greek, then in Egyptian, then in Latin she has learned from secret tutors. Each word is deliberate, each phrase measured. Her voice is calm yet magnetic, filled with both intellect and charm, with the promise of alliance and the certainty of sovereignty. Caesar, though seasoned in politics and warfare, is intrigued. Here is a queen unlike any he has encountered, not merely a figure of beauty or ambition, but a strategist, a performer, a monarch who wields language, image, and presence as deftly as any sword. The court watches, the scribes record, but Cleopatra alone dictates the terms of this first encounter. The alliance that will bind two great worlds begins not with a treaty, but with a gaze, a gesture, a demonstration of unshakable will. And so the currents of history shift. Egypt and Rome, river and empire, queen and general. Their destinies entwine like braided reeds along the Nile's banks. Through courage, calculation, and the mastery of theater, Cleopatra has not only captured the attention of one of Rome's most powerful men, but has signaled to the world that her reign will be unlike any other, that her sovereignty will be performed, rehearsed, and remembered long after empires rise and fall. In that moment, rolled in silk yet commanding the gaze of a conqueror, Cleopatra steps fully into history, not as a princess waiting for fate, but as a queen shaping it, as a mind and presence that will echo across centuries, as a woman whose every word, every movement, every choice becomes legend. Asterisk, asterisk, the palace of Alexandria trembles not from earthquake nor siege, but from the quiet, deliberate movements of power being claimed. Cleopatra, once veiled in silk and mystery, now steps into the throne room, her presence commanding, her mind sharp, her body poised like the coiled spring of the Nile ready to surge. Her father, Ptolemy XII, has passed quietly into the shadows of history, leaving the throne not unclaimed but contested, for her brothers and sisters circle like vultures, their whispers sharp with ambition, their eyes calculating, their hands already reaching for the crown that is not yet theirs. But Cleopatra moves differently. She does not shout. She does not strike. She waits, she calculates, she performs. The people of Alexandria gather at the palace gates, their voices carrying both curiosity and expectation. Merchants speak of taxes, farmers of grain, soldiers of loyalty, priests of omens. All these voices mingle in the great hall. And Cleopatra listens, absorbing, measuring, understanding that her throne is not only marble and gold, but the hearts, the wills, the very breath of her people. She approaches her brothers with grace, yet with unmistakable authority. Words, gestures, glances, each a calculated step in the delicate dance of succession. She offers alliances, yet signals independence. She smiles where charm will win, frowns where firmness is required. And slowly, inexorably, she asserts herself as queen not through force alone, but through perception, through presence, through the quiet mastery of every eye and every ear in the room. The court watches as Cleopatra takes her seat upon the throne, the crown of Egypt settling not just upon her head, but into her being, as if the diadem itself recognizes the mind and will beneath it. Her advisors bow, her courtiers watch, her enemies hesitate. She has spoken, moved, performed, and the throne belongs to her. Even Rome, across the sea, senses the shift. Caesar's envoys, informed by their own networks and spies, report not only a new queen, but a queen who commands attention, commands respect, commands history itself. And Cleopatra knows that the challenge is only beginning. The throne is hers, yes, but it is also a stage upon which her every act will be scrutinized. A canvas upon which diplomacy, spectacle, and strategy will paint her legacy. Her first acts are deliberate, public yet symbolic. She appears among the people, riding along the Nile in a barge of gold and perfumed silk. Her visage visible to all, her smile measured, her gaze a promise of both mercy and authority. Priests and citizens alike bow, not merely to tradition, but to presence, to performance, to the magnetic certainty that Cleopatra embodies both Egypt and the destiny of Egypt. And in her private chambers, away from the eyes of courtiers and envoys, she plans, as she always has, for the future, for Rome, for her siblings, for alliances, for rivals, for empire. Maps are unfurled, letters sealed, speeches rehearsed. Every gesture, every word, every glance is a thread in the vast tapestry of rule she is weaving. Cleopatra has claimed the throne, yes, but she has also claimed the narrative, the perception, the story itself. The Nile flows beneath her barge. The sun glints upon its waters. And the queen knows that she now rules not only by law, but by legend. A legend that will ripple outward, across seas, across time, across empires yet to rise and fall. For this is the moment when the world begins to see Cleopatra not simply as a princess of Egypt, but as a queen of unparalleled intellect, indomitable will, and unparalleled artistry. A queen whose reign will intertwine language, image, diplomacy, and courage, whose story will endure as both history and myth, whose power will echo long after the stones of Alexandria have cooled and the Nile carries away another century of sand. Asterisk, asterisk, and now we move quietly into the inner chambers of power, where Cleopatra, now seated firmly upon her throne, begins the delicate, invisible work of governance, the work that will define her not merely as a ruler, but as a mind capable of bending empires to her will. The palace hums with activity, scribes scrawling letters in ink as dark as the Nile at midnight, messengers arriving and departing like the tide, priests whispering omens, generals adjusting formations, and advisors, both Egyptian and Greek, watching, calculating, waiting. Cleopatra does not rush. She listens first. She absorbs every report of harvest, of flood, of rebellion, of foreign interest. She weighs the loyalty of her generals, the temper of her people, the subtle ambitions of her siblings, the ever-present shadow of Rome. Her mind moves like a hawk in the sky, circling silently, not striking yet, but preparing to descend with precision. Her first political maneuvers are subtle, almost invisible. She sends envoys to rival clans, negotiating grain and allegiance. She attends temple ceremonies, ensuring the priests see her as both daughter of the gods and protector of the people. She opens markets and adjusts taxes, balancing mercy with authority. Every action is both practical and symbolic. The people see fairness, and the enemies see wisdom. The court sees command, and Rome begins to recognize subtle defiance wrapped in diplomacy. Then comes Caesar. The general arrives in Alexandria with his legions, a wave of foreign power rolling up the Nile, and Cleopatra moves as she always has, with calculation, with courage, with performance. Their meetings are a dance, an exchange of minds, not merely an alignment of armies or coins. She speaks in Greek and Egyptian, interspersed with Latin learned in secret, her voice carrying both intelligence and charm, authority and invitation. She offers alliance, but on her terms, ensuring that Egypt's independence remains intact. Even as Rome's shadow stretches across the eastern Mediterranean, the court is astounded. The generals, the ambassadors, the ministers, all watch as Cleopatra maneuvers subtly, appeasing without conceding, negotiating without surrendering, performing the art of power with an elegance that conceals the razor-sharp intellect beneath. Her advisors whisper, marveling at the precision of her moves, while priests nod at the alignment of omens and rituals, knowing that her power is not only political but sacred, woven into the very fabric of the Nile, of Alexandria, of Egypt itself. And as the sun sets over the harbor, turning the water to molten gold, Cleopatra sits in her chambers, reviewing letters, adjusting alliances, planning next moves in a game of kingdoms that stretches across continents. Her reign is no longer only a matter of inheritance. It is an exercise in mastery, of language, of perception, of loyalty, of spectacle and subtlety, of calculation and courage. In these quiet, meticulous maneuvers, the queen who once entered the palace rolled in a carpet, now shapes the destiny of a nation, guides the hand of a general of Rome, and secures for herself a place not only on the throne, but in history itself, a place where intellect, charisma, and courage converge to create legend. And now we drift along the waters of the Nile, where Cleopatra's power takes shape not only in words and alliances, but in light, in perfume, in spectacle, in the very art of being seen and remembered. The queen emerges upon a golden barge, gliding along the river like a goddess made flesh, its sails shimmering in the morning sun, its hull adorned with carvings of serpents and lotus blossoms, its prow slicing through the water with the precision of a ceremonial blade. On board, Cleopatra reclines upon cushions of embroidered silk, her body framed by gilded pillars, her eyes catching the reflection of the river and sky, her hair scented with jasmine, rose, and myrrh, her presence at once delicate and unassailable. The breeze carries her perfume to the banks, and the people of Alexandria pause in their daily labor to watch, to whisper, to marvel, for they are seeing not merely a queen, but the embodiment of Egypt itself, its grandeur, its mystery, its majesty. Every detail is deliberate. Her barge is a floating temple, her dress, a tapestry of symbolism and seduction, her gestures, a language of authority as precise as any treaty signed in the palace. Even the musicians, the dancers, the attendants, are actors in a carefully composed performance, their movements harmonized to underscore her grace, their songs rising like incense to the heavens. Through this spectacle, Cleopatra teaches a lesson older than the pyramids. That power is as much a matter of perception as of force, that a throne is not only defended with armies, but also claimed with presence, with awe, with wonder. She knows that a single image, the barge glinting on the Nile, the queen herself poised like a living idol, can carry more weight than 1,000 edicts, can shape loyalty more subtly than a fleet of soldiers. The crowd on the riverbanks murmurs, their voices a chorus of astonishment and devotion. Merchants pause, soldiers salute, priests nod in recognition. And in every gaze fixed upon her, Cleopatra reads not only admiration, but allegiance, fear, curiosity, and the intricate web of loyalty she must always weave. This is more than performance. It is strategy. For Cleopatra understands that to be queen is to occupy every space at once. The halls of the palace, the minds of the people, the attention of Rome, and even the memory of future generations. The golden barge is both her stage and her weapon. Its glitter a shield against those who might underestimate her, its brilliance a message to allies and enemies alike. Here is a ruler who commands not only her country, but the imagination of the world. As the sun dips toward the horizon, casting long shadows upon the river, Cleopatra's barge drifts silently onward, leaving behind ripples in the water and awe in the hearts of her people. And in that moment, she is not merely a queen of Egypt. She is a living symbol of power, a ruler who has learned that the subtle art of spectacle can bend perception, shape loyalty, and carry a kingdom forward through the currents of history. And now, we move into the shadowed chambers of curiosity, where Cleopatra, already master of spectacle, diplomacy, and perception, turns her mind to another realm of power, the subtle, lethal art of poisons, an arena where knowledge itself can be weapon, and where survival is measured not in armies, but in understanding the fragile chemistry of life and death. Within the cool, dimly lit laboratories of her palace, vials of liquid shimmer with colors like captured sunsets, dusty powders of herbs and minerals lie waiting upon stone shelves, and delicate instruments of glass and bronze catch the morning sun. Here, Cleopatra experiments not for vanity, not merely for curiosity, but as a sovereign seeking mastery over both her enemies and herself. She studies the effect of various substances, extracts from the silphium plant, venoms of snakes captured from the Nile's banks, oils infused with deadly herbs and exotic minerals, each tested carefully, cautiously, first upon animals, then in subtle demonstrations upon willing servants. Every result is recorded meticulously, every reaction noted with precision. For Cleopatra understands that knowledge is the most reliable form of defense, and that death, if administered with skill and discretion, can be both shield and sword. Her courtiers whisper in awe and fear. Some call it madness, some call it brilliance, but Cleopatra herself is untroubled. She sees the act of learning, the act of testing, as an extension of her sovereignty. To command Egypt is to understand life in all its complexity, and life's darker counterpart, the delicate, terrifying chemistry of mortality. Yet even as she experiments, she remains aware of the theater of perception. Rumors of her knowledge spread beyond the palace walls. That Cleopatra can charm or destroy with a glance. That a queen's beauty masks a mind capable of bending fate itself. That even a sip of wine from her hands might carry secrets invisible to the untrained eye. And so, the stories multiply, enhancing her power not just in fact, but in legend. She understands that perception can be as potent as reality, that fear and admiration can be tools as precise as the poison she studies. This is a lesson in subtlety, in control, in the careful balance of knowledge and display. Cleopatra learns that true authority is never absolute. It is negotiated, tested, perceived. To be a queen is to navigate a labyrinth of ambition, loyalty, envy, and superstition. And the careful mastery of poisons becomes one more arrow in her quiver, a means to protect herself, to secure her throne, and to maintain the delicate equilibrium of power within her kingdom. In the quiet hours of night, when Alexandria sleeps beneath the silver gleam of the moon, Cleopatra walks among her vials and instruments, her mind alive with calculations and possibilities. She is not cruel nor careless, but deliberate, methodical, ever vigilant. For she knows that the survival of Egypt, the survival of her dynasty, depends upon foresight, intellect, and courage. The courage to explore the shadowed corners of knowledge, and the wisdom to wield what she discovers with precision. And so the queen continues, balancing diplomacy and spectacle with secrecy and science, her reign strengthened not only by alliances and armies, but by the quiet, measured mastery of life and death itself. Here, in these chambers of shadow and light, Cleopatra becomes not only a ruler of a nation, but a sovereign of perception, intellect, and inexorable will. Her legacy woven with both beauty and danger. Her story drifting down through centuries like the eternal currents of the Nile. Now, let us sail across the shifting tides of history, from the serene banks of the Nile to the tempestuous waters of empire, where Cleopatra's destiny intertwines with that of Rome once more. Not with Julius Caesar, whose shadow still lingers, but with another, Mark Antony, general, politician, man of ambition and contradiction. The first meeting is neither casual nor ordinary. It is a calculated convergence of worlds, a collision of ambition, intellect, and presence. Alexandria prepares itself as if for a sacred ritual, streets lined with citizens, the river shimmering with gilded barges, temples scented with frankincense and myrrh, and the queen herself, poised upon the water's edge, an embodiment of Egypt's power, beauty, and cunning. Mark Antony arrives, aware of Cleopatra's reputation, a man who has conquered lands and legions, but uncertain of the force he will encounter here. He sees her not merely as a queen, but as a sovereign mind, a presence that challenges perception, a spirit that commands loyalty not through threat alone, but through intellect, charm, and mastery of spectacle. And Cleopatra, ever deliberate, understands the subtle balance of attraction and power. She meets Antony with all the poise of a goddess descending from myth, her gaze direct yet inviting, her gestures deliberate, her every movement designed to convey command and fascination simultaneously. Their conversation unfolds like a game of chess. Each word calculated, each pause weighted with meaning, each smile a carefully placed instrument of influence. Here, diplomacy intertwines with desire. The Nile itself seems to bear witness, its waters reflecting the golden sails of barges, its currents carrying whispers of both strategy and seduction. Cleopatra speaks in Greek and Egyptian, in tones that charm and provoke, revealing intelligence, wit, and foresight that challenge the general's assumptions. She demonstrates, as she always has, that power is most potent when it is both seen and subtle, when spectacle masks strategy, when beauty becomes a language of influence as precise as any treaty or army. The court watches, aware that a union of this kind is not merely personal but political, a convergence that could shape the future of kingdoms and empires alike. Every gesture, every word, every subtle glance is recorded in the minds of ambassadors, and will ripple outward through Rome and Egypt, through the whispers of courtiers and the calculations of senators. In private chambers, away from the scrutiny of observers, the queen and the general continue their dialogue, not only of politics and power, but of vision and legacy. Cleopatra demonstrates her mastery of alliances, her understanding of Rome's ambitions, her ability to weave loyalty, admiration, and intellect into bonds that extend beyond the battlefield. And Antony, despite his own power and reputation, finds himself both challenged and intrigued, drawn into a relationship as much of minds and strategy as of desire or allegiance. And so the seeds of a partnership are sown, one that will shape the politics of the Mediterranean, that will intertwine the fates of Egypt and Rome, that will challenge enemies and redefine expectations of both empires. Cleopatra, once a young queen learning diplomacy, now moves with the precision of experience, the confidence of mastery, the brilliance of intellect and theater combined. She is a sovereign in every sense, commanding armies through words, alliances through presence, and history through the careful crafting of her image, her mind, and her deeds. As night falls over Alexandria, torches flickering against the walls of the palace, Cleopatra contemplates the currents she has set in motion, the empires she has touched, the alliances she has forged. And in that quiet, reflective moment, she understands that her power is not measured in marble or gold, but in the subtle mastery of perception, the deliberate shaping of narrative, and the relentless pursuit of strategy, intellect, and influence, a pursuit that will define her reign, her legacy, and the very story of Egypt itself. As the sun rises and falls over the city of Alexandria, its golden light reflecting off the waters of the Nile, we witness the deepening of a bond that will alter the currents of history. Cleopatra and Mark Antony, once cautious allies, now navigate the intricate labyrinth of politics, desire, and strategy, each aware of the delicate balance required to maintain both power and perception. In the great halls of the palace, plans are laid with meticulous care. Generals confer, diplomats whisper, scribes transcribe, and Cleopatra moves through it all with the serene authority of one who understands that influence is not only wielded, but cultivated, like the gardens that stretch along the banks of the Nile. Her presence commands attention, her mind orchestrates outcomes. Her alliances are carefully tested, her enemies subtly measured. Mark Antony, despite his own formidable reputation, finds himself both intrigued and challenged. Cleopatra's intellect and poise are not simply ornamental. They are instruments of power, precise and deliberate. Together, they discuss strategies that will fortify Egypt, secure resources, and project authority not only across the Nile, but into the corridors of Rome itself. Every decision is entwined with both personal and political consequence, every gesture a calculated assertion of sovereignty and influence. The people of Alexandria witness the alliance not merely as politics, but as theater. Cleopatra, always aware of the interplay between perception and power, ensures that her image is visible, commanding, that her presence reinforces loyalty, inspires awe, and solidifies her reign. Processions, ceremonies, and public appearances become subtle instruments in a larger game, where the queen's intellect, beauty, and strategy are inseparable, and where every action reverberates across kingdoms. In private, the partnership between Cleopatra and Antony is equally strategic. They exchange ideas, challenge assumptions, and probe the weaknesses of adversaries. Cleopatra studies Antony as she has studied others before, not merely for his affection, but for insight, for understanding, for leverage. Their conversations flow between politics and philosophy, between empire and individual ambition, for both recognize that history is shaped not solely by armies, but by the minds that guide them, and by the alliances that endure in thought and strategy as much as in battle. Yet, even in these careful maneuvers, tension lingers. Rome's senators whisper of ambition unchecked, of influence in foreign lands, of power that threatens the republic itself. Cleopatra, ever vigilant, anticipates these ripples across the Mediterranean, calculating each move to protect Egypt, to maintain her sovereignty, and to extend her influence without provoking destruction. In the quiet hours, when the palace sleeps beneath a blanket of stars, Cleopatra contemplates the vast network of relationships she has woven. Alliances with generals, loyalty from citizens, influence over foreign powers, and the delicate management of perception that ensures her reign remains unchallenged. Her mind is a river of strategy, flowing endlessly, adapting, calculating, and balancing ambition with caution, desire with duty, intellect with performance. Through these deepening alliances and calculated risks, Cleopatra asserts not merely her rule, but her mastery over the very currents of power itself. She becomes both sovereign and strategist, performer and planner, a ruler whose intellect, courage, and artistry in governance ensure that Egypt's legacy and her own will resonate across centuries, like the unceasing flow of the Nile beneath the eternal sky. Now, let us drift toward the horizon of uncertainty, where the calm waters of the Nile meet the restless tides of Rome, and where Cleopatra's reign, brilliant and deliberate, faces the first shadows of confrontation. Rome, a republic teetering between tradition and ambition, observes the growing influence of a foreign queen, whose alliance with Mark Antony strengthens her position, whose intellect and charm unsettle senators, and whose mastery of perception transforms political presence into power. Whispers fill the marble halls of the Senate, carried by envoys and merchants alike. Egypt's queen is no longer a distant curiosity, but a force whose reach threatens to ripple across the Mediterranean. Cleopatra, aware of these murmurs, does not tremble. She has faced rivals before. She has navigated courts with intrigue and calculation. She has mastered spectacle as deftly as diplomacy. Her response is subtle yet unmistakable. In Alexandria, she fortifies alliances, strengthens the loyalty of her people, and ensures that her presence is seen as both sovereign and protector. Public ceremonies become messages encoded in ritual and image. Every festival, every temple procession, every appearance along the Nile carries layers of meaning. To her people, a queen who embodies divinity and stability. To Rome, a sovereign not easily swayed, whose power is measured in intellect, charisma, and the loyalty she commands. And in private chambers, plans are whispered, letters are sealed, and spies report, for Cleopatra understands that vigilance is the price of sovereignty. Mark Antony, loyal yet aware of the precarious balance, advises caution, but Cleopatra tempers caution with audacity. She knows that hesitation can invite conquest, that perception often outweighs the weight of armies. Together, they navigate the subtle tensions of diplomacy, crafting alliances, sending messages through envoys, and asserting Egypt's independence without provoking immediate conflict. Meanwhile, the corridors of Rome echo with anxiety. Senators debate, generals weigh their influence, and Antony's actions abroad are scrutinized as though through a magnifying glass. Cleopatra's very presence becomes a political instrument, her image and her intelligence intertwined in a subtle strategy that seeks not domination by force, but command by perception, influence, and foresight. Even within Alexandria, the court senses the tension. Every word spoken, every gesture performed, every smile offered carries weight. The people, unaware of the deeper intrigues, see only a queen whose confidence radiates from her very being, whose intelligence commands respect, whose artistry in diplomacy transforms political complexity into performance. And so, Cleopatra's reign enters a new phase, one in which she must navigate not only the internal currents of her own court, but the vast, unpredictable seas of foreign power, where Rome's ambition threatens to collide with Egyptian sovereignty. Yet she does so with the same artistry and precision that has always guided her, with calculation, with courage, with an understanding that power is as much about perception as it is about conquest. As night descends upon Alexandria, the Nile reflecting silver beneath a tranquil sky, Cleopatra contemplates the challenges yet to come. She knows that the balance of empires, the loyalty of allies, and the survival of her dynasty depend upon the subtle mastery of diplomacy, the careful orchestration of image and action, and the relentless vigilance of a sovereign whose intellect is as formidable as her presence. In the quiet of her chambers, she prepares, for the currents of history are shifting, and she intends to steer them with both grace and unyielding will. As the sun rises over Alexandria, casting golden reflections upon the Nile, Cleopatra moves with the precision of one who understands that every gesture, every word, every glance is an instrument of power. The palace, vast and intricate, hums with activity. Scribes recording alliances, diplomats sending reports, soldiers awaiting orders. While courtiers observe, measure, and speculate, Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, is acutely aware of the precarious balance she maintains. Rome watches always, their legions casting long shadows over Mediterranean politics, their senators whispering of ambition unchecked, their generals calculating the reach of influence beyond the sea. But she does not fear, she strategizes. Every alliance she forms, every marriage she arranges, every festival she orchestrates, is designed to reinforce loyalty, project authority, and remind both her people and her rivals that she is the sovereign of perception as well as territory. The city itself reflects her power. Markets bustle with renewed energy, temples resonate with ceremony, and citizens see their queen not only as ruler but as protector, whose presence ensures prosperity and security. Cleopatra understands that public perception is as vital as military strength. A kingdom's stability is rooted not only in armies and wealth, but in the unwavering faith of its people. Her correspondence with Mark Antony becomes a careful exchange of strategy and insight. Together, they navigate the complexities of Roman politics, anticipating the whispers of senators, weighing the ambitions of generals, and ensuring that every action taken is measured against potential consequences. Through these letters and envoys, Cleopatra consolidates her authority, extending her influence into Rome itself, while maintaining a firm hand upon her own kingdom. Even in the palace, internal rivals observe her every move. Brothers, advisors, and ministers test her resolve. Yet Cleopatra responds with a mixture of charm and decisiveness, turning potential threats into opportunities, disputes into alliances, and resistance into loyalty. Her brilliance lies not in confrontation alone, but in her ability to transform tension into stability, to mold perception and allegiance with the skill of an artist shaping clay. Meanwhile, Rome's unease grows. The Senate debates the implications of Egypt's queen, whose intelligence and audacity defy simplistic categorization. Some fear her influence over Antony, others see her as a symbol of Eastern decadence. But all cannot deny the calculated mastery with which she navigates politics, and the subtle yet unmistakable power she wields across continents. And so Cleopatra consolidates her reign, strengthening internal structures, fortifying alliances, and demonstrating to both her people and her rivals that her sovereignty is absolute, deliberate, and enduring. Her mind remains ever active, her vision expansive, and in the quiet hours of night, as the Nile glimmers beneath a silvered moon, she contemplates future challenges, opportunities, and the subtle arts of influence, knowing that history will judge her not only by her throne, but by the mastery with which she wields intellect, perception, and courage. In these moments, the queen's power is both seen and unseen, manifest in ceremonies and alliances, but residing most profoundly in her mind, a mind that calculates, anticipates, and commands, ensuring that Cleopatra's Egypt remains sovereign, resilient, and remembered, long after the echoes of Roman ambition have faded into the pages of history. Now, let us enter the temples, the streets, and the sacred spaces of Alexandria, where Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, extends her dominion beyond politics, into the very hearts, minds, and spirits of her people. For she knows that true power is not only wielded in councils or battlefields, but in the imagination of a kingdom, in the rituals, symbols, and beliefs that bind a society together. The temples are alive with ceremony. Priests chant prayers to Isis, Horus, and the gods of the Nile, their voices rising like incense into the vaulted heavens. Cleopatra herself moves through these sacred spaces, her presence both human and divine, her gestures measured, her gaze purposeful, as she performs rituals that reinforce her authority, linking her identity with the gods themselves. She dons garments embroidered with gold thread, adornments shaped like serpents and sacred symbols, her hair and skin perfumed with oils and flowers, her image radiating both majesty and accessibility. For the people must see a queen who embodies both earthly and divine power. Through these rituals, she signals that Egypt's sovereignty is inseparable from its spiritual order, and that she is both guardian and guide, the living nexus of tradition, religion, and governance. But Cleopatra does not rely solely on ceremony. She patronizes the arts, musicians, poets, sculptors, and scholars, ensuring that her reign is remembered not only in law but in culture, in song, in story, in images that will echo through generations. Libraries and schools flourish under her guidance. Texts are preserved, translated, and composed. Knowledge is valued as both legacy and tool of governance. Public appearances are meticulously orchestrated. Each movement, each gesture a reinforcement of the queen's dual role: human ruler, divine presence. She parades through streets adorned with banners, engages with citizens, receives gifts, and listens to grievances, all while subtly reminding observers that her authority is both visible and sacred. The Nile itself becomes a stage, barges glinting with gold and silk, flowers and incense drifting upon the water, a living spectacle of Egyptian majesty, demonstrating that the queen commands both land and river, faith and loyalty. Through these cultural and religious acts, Cleopatra ensures that her power is deeply rooted, not simply in armies or alliances, but in the consciousness of her people, in their belief in the continuity of their traditions and their sovereign's divine right. Even Roman observers, distant but watchful, sense the subtle potency of this influence. A queen whose strength is as much spiritual and cultural as it is political or martial. In the quiet hours of night, when Alexandria sleeps beneath a star-laden sky, Cleopatra reflects upon the web of power she has woven. Alliances secured, enemies measured, traditions honored, and culture celebrated. She understands that history will remember her not only for diplomacy or beauty, but for the artistry with which she unites sovereignty, religion, and cultural legacy, for the brilliance with which she commands perception, devotion, and reverence. And so, in the temples and along the streets, through rituals, festivals, and the silent observation of her citizens, Cleopatra manifests as both ruler and living goddess, a sovereign whose presence bridges the mortal and divine, whose intellect, strategy, and artistry ensure that Egypt's power endures, and whose legacy, etched in culture, faith, and imagination, will resonate far beyond the banks of the Nile, across seas, across centuries, and across the memory of the world itself. As the Nile flows endlessly toward the Mediterranean, so too does the reign of Cleopatra unfold, intricate, deliberate, and luminous. Her power is neither sudden nor purely inherited. It is cultivated through years of observation, learning, and cunning strategy, through a mind honed by language, culture, and careful study of her predecessors. She speaks 9 languages fluently: Egyptian, Greek, Hebrew, Median, and more. Not as a boast, but as a tool of sovereignty. With words, she navigates courts, treaties, and negotiations, conversing directly with ambassadors, generals, and kings. No translator stands between her and her subjects. She understands that true influence comes from comprehension, from the ability to speak and be understood across every layer of society, from the subtle authority that language conveys. But diplomacy alone does not secure a throne. Cleopatra understands the theater of power. She arrives at Alexandria in barges of gold, perfumed and adorned like Isis herself, and in every gesture, she communicates authority and divinity. The people see a queen who is both approachable and untouchable, who commands all loyalty and, when necessary, fear. Her presence in a room, her entrance at ceremonies, even her choice of attire and fragrance, all serve as instruments in the careful orchestration of rule. She experiments with poisons, herbs, and elixirs, not out of cruelty, but from the conviction that knowledge is the ultimate safeguard. Understanding life and death, and the subtle interactions of substances, becomes another layer of security, a means to protect herself, her throne, and her people. Her mastery of chemistry is an extension of her sovereignty, a mind that controls perception, alliances, and even the possibility of demise. Her relationships with Julius Caesar and Mark Antony are not merely romantic, but profoundly political. Each alliance is calculated, balancing love, loyalty, and strategy, ensuring that Egypt's sovereignty is protected, while extending her influence across Rome, touching the very heart of imperial power. With Antony, she orchestrates displays of wealth, culture, and intellect that both charm and unsettle, demonstrating that true power is a synthesis of presence, perception, and performance. And yet, Cleopatra's brilliance is not confined to spectacle or strategy. She governs her kingdom with care, attending to grain stores, river management, and commerce, ensuring that Egypt thrives under her rule. Citizens perceive a queen who is attentive and deliberate, a ruler whose intellect and foresight secure stability, even amid the turbulence of foreign ambitions and internal intrigue. Her story, however, is tinged with tragedy and enduring myth. Roman propaganda distorts her legacy, portraying her as seductress above sovereign, masking the intelligence, foresight, and political mastery that defined her reign. Yet the memory of Cleopatra endures. As a queen who wielded intellect, language, diplomacy, and performance as weapons, whose beauty was inseparable from strategy, whose presence bent perception to her will, and whose legacy is etched into history as a testament to resilience, courage, and brilliance. As twilight descends on Alexandria, the Nile shimmering with the reflection of a dying sun, Cleopatra walks along the riverbanks, her mind tracing the currents of alliances, threats, and opportunities, her gaze fixed not on the past, but on the endless possibilities of the present, her heart and intellect aligned in the eternal endeavor of sovereign mastery. In her every decision, her every gesture, and her every alliance, we see the portrait of a queen who understood that history is not only recorded in battlefields, but also in perception, strategy, and the unwavering intelligence of one who truly rules. Now we sail deeper into the currents of history, where Cleopatra's genius intertwines with the ambitions of Rome, and where the alliance with Mark Antony becomes a force both magnetic and formidable. Their union is not born merely of affection. It is a calculated convergence of intellect, strategy, and vision. In private chambers of Alexandria, away from the scrutiny of the world, they discuss the future of empires, the fate of armies, and the delicate equilibrium between love and sovereignty. Every word exchanged is deliberate, every glance a silent negotiation. For both understand that perception shapes power as much as force. Antony, accustomed to the grandeur of Rome, is simultaneously enthralled and challenged by Cleopatra's presence. She is not merely beautiful, she is a sovereign mind, articulate, commanding, and profoundly aware of every ripple her decisions cause. In their dialogues, she probes his assumptions, challenges his strategies, and strengthens the bonds of alliance, while subtly ensuring that her influence over the Mediterranean remains unassailable. Publicly, their relationship becomes spectacle and statement. Cleopatra's barges, gilded and perfumed, glide along the Nile, a procession of authority, ritual, and symbolism. Citizens, courtiers, and ambassadors alike witness the queen's mastery of image, pageantry, and political messaging. Every appearance, every ceremonial gesture, carries layers of meaning, loyalty, divinity, and strategic intent, reminding all who watch that Cleopatra's reign is deliberate, disciplined, and absolute. Yet beneath the ceremony lies calculation. Cleopatra strengthens Egypt's economy, cultivates knowledge, and fortifies her people's loyalty, ensuring that the kingdom remains resilient, even as foreign powers eye the wealth and potential of the Nile. Her influence extends through Antony into Rome itself, a subtle web of correspondence, persuasion, and strategic alliance, designed to protect her dynasty while projecting power across seas. In these months and years, their bond deepens, a fusion of intellect, vision, and ambition, where passion and politics converge seamlessly. Cleopatra demonstrates repeatedly that authority is not only enacted through armies or gold, but through the careful orchestration of perception, dialogue, and action. And yet, Cleopatra knows the fragility of alliances. The winds of Roman politics shift constantly. Senators debate, generals scheme, and whispers of discontent flow like shadows through marble halls. But she meets these challenges with the same deliberate artistry that has always defined her rule: careful preparation, deep understanding, and the subtle power of influence. In the quiet of night, beneath Alexandria's star-filled skies, Cleopatra reflects on the currents she has navigated. She sees the possibilities, the threats, the intricate dance of empires, and she calculates the next steps with precision. Her legacy, she knows, will be remembered not simply in stories of beauty or love, but in the brilliance of governance, the mastery of diplomacy, and the enduring intelligence with which she shaped the fate of nations. Thus, Cleopatra's story unfolds not as myth alone, but as a living testament to strategy, courage, and intellect. A queen whose reign navigated the tumult of empires, whose alliances blended personal and political mastery, and whose presence continues to resonate through the corridors of history, as both ruler and visionary, as sovereign and strategist, as Cleopatra, the eternal queen of the Nile. Asterisk, as the Nile glimmers beneath the morning sun, a subtle tension ripples through Alexandria, for Cleopatra and Mark Antony now face a force as persistent as the river itself, Rome. The city across the sea, ancient and relentless, watches their union with a mixture of fascination, fear, and calculated suspicion. Cleopatra, ever vigilant, senses the shifting tides of Roman politics. Senators whisper of ambition unchecked, of generals swayed by foreign influence, and of an Egyptian queen whose intellect and presence unsettle the old order. But she does not falter. She observes, calculates, and responds. Her diplomacy is precise, her strategies layered with foresight, and her understanding of perception allows her to navigate challenges that would topple a lesser ruler. Mark Antony, loyal yet pragmatic, negotiates these waters with care. He recognizes Cleopatra's genius, her command over her kingdom, and the subtle ways in which her influence extends into Rome itself. Together, they forge plans, military, economic, and political, ensuring that Egypt remains sovereign, while projecting power across the Mediterranean with elegance and authority. Alexandria itself becomes a stage for their strategy. Ceremonies along the Nile are orchestrated not only for spectacle, but as subtle messages to allies and adversaries alike. The populace sees a queen whose majesty is unquestionable, whose intellect guides policy, and whose presence commands loyalty. Every festival, every procession, every ritual reinforces her authority, reminding all who observe that Cleopatra is both sovereign and strategist. Yet the shadows of Rome grow ever longer. Ambassadors arrive bearing veiled threats, reports of dissent reach the palace, and the whispers of envy and suspicion ripple across the corridors of power. Cleopatra responds with characteristic acuity. She cultivates loyalty, secures alliances, and ensures that every action, whether subtle or overt, fortifies her position without provoking unnecessary conflict. In private, Antony and Cleopatra discuss contingencies, strategies, and the delicate balance between influence and confrontation. They weigh the ambitions of Roman generals, the potential for rebellion, and the loyalty of Egypt's people. Every decision is a careful calculation, each maneuver designed to maintain authority, preserve sovereignty, and secure a future for their children and their legacy. Through this dance of diplomacy and strategy, Cleopatra's brilliance is on full display. She demonstrates that true power is multifaceted. It is cultivated in knowledge, reinforced in perception, and executed with courage and precision. Her reign is a living testament to the interplay between intellect, image, and influence, a tapestry woven from careful observation, deliberate action, and an unwavering commitment to her people and her dynasty. As night descends over Alexandria, the city glows beneath a sky of stars, and Cleopatra walks along the palace terraces, contemplating the currents of power that surround her. She knows that history watches, that Rome observes, and that the delicate threads of loyalty, perception, and diplomacy must be tended with skill and vigilance. In these quiet moments, we see not only a queen of unparalleled beauty, but a sovereign whose mind shapes destiny, whose intellect bends circumstance, and whose legacy, like the eternal Nile, flows across time, resilient, profound, and enduring. Asterisk, asterisk, as Alexandria hums with life, the queen contemplates not only the present, but the threads of the future, threads woven through her children, the living continuations of her legacy and the anchors of Egypt's future. Cleopatra's children are more than heirs. They are symbols of dynastic resilience, bearers of political alliances, and instruments of diplomacy. Each child represents a careful balance of bloodlines, a union of Egyptian tradition, Macedonian heritage, and Roman influence. Through them, she projects power, extends loyalty, and secures the lineage of her house. The young prince, her son with Julius Caesar, becomes a figure of fascination. His presence a subtle reminder of Rome's entanglement with Egypt, a living emblem of the delicate, intertwined fates of two great powers. Yet Cleopatra does not rely on symbolism alone. She cultivates knowledge, understanding, and preparation in her children, ensuring that they comprehend not only the grandeur of the throne, but the responsibilities, perils, and strategies necessary to sustain it. Her children are educated in languages, diplomacy, and history, immersed in Egyptian rituals, courtly protocol, and the wisdom of scholars. She teaches them the subtle arts of persuasion, perception, and governance, so that when the currents of power inevitably shift, they will navigate them with intelligence and foresight. In this, Cleopatra demonstrates that sovereignty is not merely inherited, but cultivated, nurtured, and transmitted through careful preparation. Yet the shadow of Rome looms large. The ambitions of senators and generals, the political tides of the Republic, and the growing tensions surrounding Antony all underscore the fragility of Egypt's position. Cleopatra knows that her children are not only heirs, but bargaining pieces, symbols in a game that spans continents, where loyalty, diplomacy, and perception can determine life or death, victory or defeat. Even within the palace, she balances maternal care with political calculation. Moments of tenderness coexist with strategic instruction, as she molds their character, intellect, and awareness. She instills in them both courage and caution, an understanding that power is as much about knowledge and foresight as it is about command and presence. The city of Alexandria watches, its citizens unaware of the intricate strategies at work. For them, Cleopatra is queen, mother, and goddess. Her children, the living symbols of continuity and hope. But beneath these perceptions lies a network of calculation, vigilance, and foresight, ensuring that the dynasty, the throne, and the sovereignty of Egypt remain resilient against the unpredictable tides of Roman ambition. In the quiet hours, when the Nile mirrors the silver moon, Cleopatra contemplates the duality of her role: mother and monarch, nurturer and strategist, sovereign and visionary. Her children are the vessels through which her legacy will endure, and in their education, protection, and preparation, she secures not only Egypt's future, but the echo of her intellect, diplomacy, and unmatched sovereignty across the centuries yet to come. Through these careful actions, the queen reinforces the eternal truth of her reign: that power is cultivated, influence is wielded with insight, and that the legacy of a ruler is measured not only by the present, but by the continuity of what comes after, by the children who inherit the crown, and by the enduring spirit of a queen who shaped history with mind, courage, and vision. As the years advance, Alexandria remains a city of brilliance. Yet the horizon darkens with the gathering storms of conflict. Rome's power, ever expansive, presses closer, and Cleopatra, sovereign of Egypt, faces the relentless pressure of an empire that will not yield. The alliance with Mark Antony becomes both sanctuary and battleground. Together, they navigate the treacherous currents of politics, where loyalty is fragile, ambition is constant, and perception can shift the fates of kingdoms in an instant. Their union, once a source of strategic advantage, now draws envy, suspicion, and the scrutiny of Rome's ever-watchful eyes. Cleopatra's brilliance, however, remains undiminished. She meets each challenge with a mind sharpened by decades of rule, a heart tempered by love and loss, and an intuition honed by careful observation of human ambition. She understands that every gesture, every alliance, Every word delivered in Alexandria or across the Mediterranean must reinforce sovereignty, project authority, and anticipate betrayal. The queen orchestrates ceremonies of power that captivate both her people and her rivals. Golden barges drift along the Nile, perfumed incense fills the air, and her presence radiates the confidence of one who commands not just armies, but loyalty, faith, and the enduring belief in her legitimacy. In Alexandria's temples and courts, she performs rituals, appears in pageantry, and demonstrates the skill of a sovereign, whose power is as much cultural and spiritual as it is political. Yet even as she maneuvers with intellect and strategy, the shadow of Rome grows darker. The Senate debates, generals plot, and Antony's enemies in the east and west conspire. Cleopatra knows that survival requires more than wisdom. It requires audacity, decisiveness, and the unrelenting exercise of authority. She marshals resources, strengthens fortifications, and maintains the loyalty of her people through careful patronage, ceremonial display, and the subtle exercise of influence that only a queen of her intellect can achieve. Her children remain at the heart of her strategy, living symbols of the enduring dynasty, anchors of loyalty, and reminders of the stakes at hand. She educates them, protects them, and prepares them for a future that may be uncertain, yet is guided by the legacy she meticulously builds. In the quiet of night, Cleopatra reflects upon her life. The battles fought not only with soldiers but with perception, the alliances cultivated not only with power but with intelligence, and the careful orchestration of image, diplomacy, and legacy that has defined her reign. Even as crises loom and enemies gather, she walks the terraces of her palace, Nile waters glimmering below, a sovereign undaunted, deliberate, and unbroken. Through these final years, Cleopatra embodies the eternal truth of leadership. That power is both art and science. That influence flows as much through mind and perception as through armies, and that a queen, wise and resolute, can shape history with courage, intellect, and vision, even in the shadow of overwhelming odds. Thus, Alexandria stands under her watchful gaze, a city of light amidst encroaching darkness, and Cleopatra, the queen of the Nile, continues to command her realm with the mastery of mind and spirit, leaving a legacy that will endure beyond the rise and fall of empires, beyond the currents of time, into the eternal memory of the world itself. The waters of the Ionian Sea shimmer beneath the dawn, as fleets assemble, their sails billowing like the wings of countless birds. Here, on the waves that will determine the fate of empires, Cleopatra and Mark Antony face the inexorable might of Rome. Commanded by Octavian, a rising force whose ambition knows no bounds, Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, surveys her armada with the calm of one accustomed to responsibility, yet the weight of destiny presses upon her shoulders. Ships, soldiers, and supplies are arrayed in precise formation, each maneuver calculated, each decision balancing courage, strategy, and perception. She understands that this battle is not merely military. It is the culmination of decades of diplomacy, alliance, and political mastery. Mark Antony, loyal and resolute, stands beside her, their partnership a fusion of intellect, strategy, and shared destiny. They confer in quiet moments, adjusting tactics, anticipating the movements of the Roman fleet, weighing the loyalty of commanders, and preparing for every eventuality. Their bond is tested against the tides of war and ambition, and yet, Cleopatra's presence offers clarity, vision, and unwavering resolve. The battle begins with thunderous intensity. Oars churn the water, sails strain against the wind, and the clash of bronze and timber echoes across the waves. Smoke rises from the horizon as fire and cannonade intertwine, a violent symphony of strategy and desperation. Cleopatra's ships, adorned with gold and symbols of divine authority, cut through the waters, carrying both hope and the weight of legacy. Despite their preparation and courage, fortune begins to waver. Roman forces advance with relentless discipline, Their formations tight, their strategies executed with ruthless precision. Cleopatra perceives the shifting tide, the moment when survival depends, not solely on valor, but on instinct, timing, and the delicate art of withdrawal. With extraordinary composure, she signals a retreat, guiding her fleet away from imminent destruction, protecting her people and her children, and demonstrating once again that sovereignty is as much about prudence as it is about daring. Mark Antony follows, understanding the necessity even as the shadow of defeat looms. The aftermath of the battle is heavy with consequence. Rome's ascendancy is confirmed, and Egypt faces an uncertain horizon. Yet Cleopatra's genius lies in her foresight, her ability to preserve what can be preserved, to maintain dignity, authority, and the legacy of her reign, even in the face of overwhelming power. In Alexandria, she prepares for the inevitable, fortifying the palace, ensuring the safety of her children, and confronting the delicate balance of survival, honor, and sovereignty. Even as the empire of Rome casts a long shadow, Cleopatra remains resolute, a queen who has navigated intrigue, diplomacy, love, and war, with intellect, courage, and a singular mastery of perception. And as the sun sets over the Nile, reflecting gold and crimson upon its eternal waters, we see a sovereign who, even at the edge of history's tide, commands presence, shapes destiny, and leaves a legacy that will endure beyond fleets, battles, and empires. Cleopatra, the eternal queen of the Nile, whose story intertwines beauty, intellect, power, and courage, in a narrative that transcends time itself. The Palace of Alexandria stands in quiet contemplation, its walls echoing with centuries of history, triumph, and ambition. Within these walls, Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, moves with the calm and deliberation that has defined her reign even as the shadow of Rome looms ever closer. Her mind, brilliant and unyielding, weighs the possibilities. She has seen the rise and fall of alliances, the sweep of armies, the fragile loyalties of kings and generals. Her heart carries both the weight of love and the burden of responsibility for the future of her children, the continuity of her dynasty, and the dignity of a kingdom that has flourished under her guidance. Mark Antony, her steadfast partner, lies fallen, the currents of battle and betrayal having claimed his life. Yet Cleopatra's resolve does not waver. She understands that power is fleeting, and that true sovereignty lies not only in survival but in the preservation of legacy. In the quiet chambers of her palace, she contemplates the choices that remain. The invasions of Rome are inevitable, their armies advancing with certainty and precision. Yet Cleopatra refuses to surrender the dignity of her crown, the sanctity of her intellect, or the autonomy of her final act. With extraordinary composure, she chooses the path that aligns with her sovereignty. Her decision is deliberate, measured, and profoundly symbolic. An act that asserts authority even in the face of mortality, an assertion of will over circumstance, intellect over force, and legacy over fleeting existence. In the final hours, Cleopatra's presence resonates throughout Alexandria. Citizens whisper of their queen, a sovereign who has commanded armies, allies, and empires, who has negotiated with the most powerful men of Rome, and who has ensured that Egypt's culture, knowledge, and sovereignty endure. Her children are secure, her lineage preserved, and the memory of her reign, shaped by intellect, strategy, and performance, remains indelibly inscribed upon the city, the Nile, and the consciousness of the world. Even as history watches, Cleopatra embodies the eternal truth of leadership. That power is measured not only by conquest, but by the ability to shape perception, protect legacy, and assert dignity even in the face of inexorable change. As the Nile flows quietly beneath a moonlit sky, the lights of Alexandria shimmer in reflection, and the queen who mastered diplomacy, strategy, beauty, and intellect leaves the world with a legacy that will echo through centuries. Cleopatra, sovereign of the Nile, resilient, brilliant, and unforgettable, remains immortal in the memory of nations, a symbol of female authority, strategic mastery, and the enduring power of vision. Asterisk, asterisk, even as the shadows of her final days lengthen over Alexandria, Cleopatra's influence continues to resonate through the streets, temples, and markets of the city. Her reign was more than political maneuvering. It was a masterclass in cultural synthesis, a weaving together of Egyptian tradition, Hellenistic knowledge, and Roman diplomacy. She understood that culture is a currency of power, and that the loyalty of her people depended not only on wealth or armies, but on respect, belief, and identification with their sovereign. Through festivals, religious ceremonies, and monumental architecture, she affirmed her divine status, aligning herself with the gods of Egypt, while also embracing the intellectual and artistic currents of the Mediterranean. The Nile itself became a stage for her influence, its waters reflecting ceremonial barges, perfumed incense, and golden splendor. Poets, historians, and artists chronicled her reign, sometimes in awe, sometimes in fear, but always acknowledging the magnetic authority of a queen who transcended conventional boundaries. Her diplomacy, her mastery of languages, and her keen understanding of perception extended Egypt's influence far beyond its borders. Ambassadors spoke of her intelligence and eloquence. Allies and rivals alike recognized that Cleopatra's sovereignty was secured not merely by armies, but by intellect, strategy, and the deliberate crafting of image. In her personal rituals and courtly displays, she fused spectacle and strategy, understanding that the visual and the symbolic are as powerful as the spoken word. Every gesture, every appearance, was calculated to reinforce authority, to project competence, divinity, and unassailable sovereignty. She set a precedent for female leadership that would echo through centuries, challenging assumptions, reshaping narratives, and inspiring generations. And even beyond politics, Cleopatra's patronage of knowledge, science, and medicine ensured that Alexandria remained a beacon of learning, a city where the intellect of scholars could flourish, and where the wisdom of one sovereign could shape the destiny of a civilization. Her legacy is not only inscribed in memory, but also in the institutions, the stories, and the enduring culture of her kingdom. As night descends upon the Nile, and the city glimmers beneath the starlit sky, we feel the pulse of Cleopatra's genius, a resonance of intellect, strategy, and cultural authority that flows beyond time, beyond mortality, and into the very consciousness of history itself. Time moves relentlessly, yet some figures remain eternal, etched into the memory of nations and the collective imagination of humanity. Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, exists not only in the annals of history, but in myth, in legend, in the quiet recollections of those who study her life, and in the eternal flow of the Nile that she once ruled with intelligence and grace. Her story is a complex tapestry of brilliance and tragedy, of intellect and beauty, of strategy and survival. Roman propagandists sought to diminish her, to cast her as seductress rather than sovereign. But the truth of her reign endures. A queen who wielded power with intellect, foresight, and indomitable will. Cleopatra's life demonstrates that leadership is not merely exercised through force, but through perception, culture, and strategy. It is measured in the subtle diplomacy of alliances, in the mastery of language and rhetoric, in the careful cultivation of image and spectacle, and in the unwavering attention to legacy. Her children, her monuments, and the cultural imprint of her reign carry forward the essence of her authority. She shapes history not only through deeds, but through memory, inspiring countless rulers, scholars, and storytellers to reconsider the nature of power, sovereignty, and female leadership. Even centuries later, her presence is felt in literature, art, and scholarship. She challenges the simplistic narratives of history, reminding us that true mastery combines intellect, vision, courage, and perception. Her beauty, wisdom, and strategic brilliance intertwine, creating an enduring symbol of female agency and sovereign resilience. As the sun rises over the timeless Nile, we reflect on the extraordinary life of Cleopatra, a queen who mastered language, diplomacy, and spectacle, who navigated empires, lovers, and rivals with unmatched skill, and whose legacy continues to flow. Like the eternal river she ruled, shaping history, culture, and memory, and inspiring generations to come. Cleopatra, the eternal queen, sovereign of the Nile, remains a testament to intellect, courage, and vision, a figure whose story teaches us that true power is as much about mind and perception as it is about armies and crowns, and that the memory of a remarkable ruler can endure beyond empires, beyond time, and into eternity.